We're continuing our discussion of the reliability of the New Testament, and we're talking now about the book of Hebrews. And I think a strong case can be made that the book of Hebrews was written before 70 A.D. Now, what is the book of Hebrews about? Well, apparently the readers were Jewish, and they had professed faith in Christ. So they left the Jewish temple and the Jewish synagogues, and now they were worshiping Jesus in churches, and they were just starting to receive persecution, though it was not to the point of spilling blood. But because they were losing their jobs and being persecuted by others, they were now thinking about abandoning their Christian faith and returning to Judaism and the Old Testament sacrifices. So here's the way the author of Hebrews, his argument goes. He says, that Jesus is superior to the angels, to Moses, to the Old Testament prophets, to the Old Testament priesthood. But he also argues along this line. He says that the Old Testament priest, the temple priest, are still standing because their work is not done, so they're still working. He says the Old Testament priest, or the temple priest, are still standing and still offering sacrifices. He says that Jesus, on the other hand, is not standing. Jesus is seated, and his work is finished. Now you might say, well, that's not that big of a deal, but just think about it. His whole argument assumes that the priests are still standing and still working, still offering animal sacrifices, which he says in his book, in the book of Hebrews, cannot take away sins, and that if the animal sacrifices could take away sins, they would be seated and their work would be done. But they're standing, they're still working, so the bloodshed of animals doesn't take away sins. He then argues that Jesus is seated at the Father's right hand because he offered himself one sacrifice for the sins of mankind. His work is finished, his work is done. Therefore, continue to trust in Jesus because his sacrifice took away your sins. The bloodshed of animals doesn't take away sins. Now just think about it for a minute. If this author is writing before the temple was destroyed, after the temple was destroyed, if he was writing after 70 A.D., this would not be his argument. He's not going to be persuasive. He says the temple priests are still standing and still offering sacrifices if the temple's been destroyed. If it was written after 70 A.D., the author of Hebrews would have argued, you want to go back to the Old Testament sacrifices? What are you going to go back to? God allowed the pagan Romans, the Gentile Romans, to march into Jerusalem and destroy the temple. There's nothing to go back to. Therefore, stay with Jesus. But his argument presupposes that the temple is still standing and the sacrifices are still being offered. It's an argument that only makes sense if the author wrote the letter to the Hebrews before 70 A.D.